he'll be in the box a lot more, get more touches in the box, and he'll have more focus on scoring goals. The player I described him as reminding me of is probably Diego Costa. Diego Costa with an additional burst of speed.
I actually think that leaves Liverpool short on the left, because I don't think playing on the left particularly suits Jota. I feel the balance of the attacking players isn't as good as it would have been last season, if that makes sense.
I'll give a name first before I'll give some traits. I think Jude Bellingham. I think this guy is just absolutely tailor-made for the Klopp system.
For as fit as he is for his age, I did think he looked like he was running through custard at the end of last season.
I think this is a bold shout, but I think he's going to be regarded as one of the best centre-backs in Europe by the end of this season.
Yeah, it doesn't always work like that. Martin appeared in more podcasts than most people last season, but he still, he didn't really get himself going at any point, even though he was on most weeks, did he? So it doesn't always work. It doesn't work in every facet of life, that's for sure. Hello, welcome back to the Edge of the Box podcast, a podcast by WhoScored.com. We've got a special summer series where we're going to preview all of the big six ahead of the new season, starting with Liverpool, and then we'll move on to Spurs and Man City next week, before covering Chelsea, Arsenal, and even Manchester United at the end of the month. I don't know how they're still in there, to be honest. We could be previewing anyone, but we are going with Manchester United still. We've got Raj from PremLeaguePanel joining Josh and myself. Raj, how are you?
Yeah, very good, thanks. Thanks for having me on.
Looking forward to previewing your boys, Liverpool?
Yeah, it should be a good one. Exciting transfer window, so plenty to talk about.
Okay, I've got some thoughts on Liverpool. I'm not sure it's as exciting as you think it is, but we'll go through it during the show. Josh, you good?
All good. Looking forward to be talking about football after enjoying not having to talk about football for a few weeks. But yeah, good, raring to go now for the new season.
I mean, to be fair, even when I'm not doing podcasts and I'm not talking about football, I'm probably talking about football with someone somewhere. Let's start off then with the transfer window assessment. Josh, I'll come to you first because I think you've got some stats, because WhoScored do actually cover the Portuguese league. Who is Darwin Núñez? What is he and where will he play? I was asked that question as if I don't know any of those things. I do know them. They were just what was in the script. I was just reading them. I do know who Darwin Núñez is. I do know he played for Benfica, and I do know he's a striker. But yeah, I'll let you carry on, Josh.
He obviously arrives as a club record signing for Liverpool. And I guess Liverpool fans know exactly. They got to see exactly what sort of player they signed when they faced Benfica in the Champions League last season. I sort of got Cavani, Luis Suarez vibes from him. I guess the long hair helps him with the Cavani comparisons, but he also has that bullishness and that direct play that Suarez had, that Liverpool fans obviously saw for many years at Liverpool. But yeah, he scored 26 goals in the Portuguese league last season. He finished with 6 in the Champions League as well. That was his debut in the competition. As many goals as Ronaldo and Mbappe scored. But I think what was most impressive about him in the Champions League, that he scored his goals against Barcelona, Bayern Munich, Liverpool and Ajax, who between them have won 21 European Cups. So at 23, he's already used to the big stage. And I think that puts him in a really good place coming to Liverpool, where they're expected to challenge for silverware in all competitions. I looked into the top-rated new signings this summer so far. As you said, we cover the Portuguese league, and that's the 6th top-rated coefficient league. So I widened the parameters and included that. He's actually the top-rated new signing so far this summer, actually ahead of Erling Haaland, who's ended up at Manchester City. And there's obviously going to be a lot to talk about how those two get on so far this season. But I'm sure Raj has some great insight into what we can expect to see, where he'll play, and where he'll fit in this front three.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it, Raj? Because, Man City and Liverpool generally over the last few years, they've been the trendsetters. Whatever they do, system, formation-wise, tactically, other teams tend to follow suit in England. So it's interesting now that both are going back with proper number 9s, and that's what it'll be for Liverpool.
Yeah, exactly. As you say, it's a big departure for Klopp, especially since he's come to Liverpool. We obviously used Firmino as a false 9. He's then latterly used Diogo Jota and Sadio Mane, who are more natural wingers, as number 9s. Darwin is definitely more of that traditional number 9. You won't see him dropping as deep as someone like Firmino in between the lines. He'll be in the box a lot more, get more touches in the box, and he'll have more focus on scoring goals. The player I describe him as reminding me of is probably Diego Costa. Diego Costa with an additional burst of speed. I think like Costa, he's got that powerful running style. He loves either running at or behind centre-backs in that kind of inside left channel, which you saw Costa do all the time. And then even how he kind of opens up his body from that left-hand side of the box kind of area and finishes is very similar to Costa. So yeah, I see a lot of similarities between the two. And I think as Josh mentioned, he's had some good pedigree in the Champions League, and those were the games really that caught my eye. I think he's come up in tussles against some very good centre backs. For example, in the Barcelona match, Ronald Araujo came up against Darwin Núñez. I rate Araujo very highly. He's actually Núñez's countryman as well for Uruguay, and Darwin won a lot of those 1v1 tussles with him because he's so aggressive and so powerful with his running style. And the same with actually Ibrahima Konate against Liverpool. He didn't really dominate Konate, but he did win a fair share of duels, and that takes some doing against someone as powerful as Konate. And unlike some number 9s, I'd say he's not that service reliant. He's not a guy who just stands in the box waiting for chances to fall at his feet. He'll try and make stuff happen himself. And I think that's important. He can either carry the ball or he can manipulate situations in the box where he can get a finish off. And that's due to that powerful style he's got and aggression. And also his finishing is pretty good. There was one against Alisson in the second leg, I think it was, where he managed to get the ball in an inside left area again and somehow managed to dink it over Alisson. And his finishes like that are quite impudent, I'd say. So yeah, there's a lot of skill there in his finishing. I think that might lend itself well to Liverpool. They've not really had that kind of figure for a long time.
I think the battle you raised with Konate there is a really good example, because Konate, the impact he made for Liverpool last season, he was almost faultless, and he did win some duels with Núñez, but Núñez also won his fair share as well. And I think it was one of the goals he scored. I can't remember what leg it was, but it went through Konate's leg. Through his legs as he tried to clear it, and then Núñez capitalised and scored. But I imagine it's just his presence being there, because he's such a buzz of energy that probably forced that mistake from Konate. But yeah, it's going to be great to see him challenging against the best centre-backs in the Premier League on a weekly basis. You've got Thiago Silva, Ruben Diaz, those sort of characters. It'll be great to see how he gets on against those players.
Yeah, Diego Carlos and Tyrone Mings as well. I've got a theory. This is my theory. I think if Liverpool sell Firmino and sign Núñez, I think their squad's much improved. But it kind of feels like it's come at the expense of Mane. And although Núñez is obviously coming in with the pedigree that we've already discussed, I actually think that leaves Liverpool short on the left, because I don't think playing on the left particularly suits Jota. They've then only got really Diaz, who I would say that's his best position on the left. So out of the the front 3 positions, I know they've got other people knocking around the squad as well. Carvalho, who we'll come on to, he could possibly play there as well. But I feel the balance of the attacking players isn't as good as it would have been last season, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I don't think it's as clear-cut at the moment with what we're going to see from Liverpool, whereas previously last season you knew exactly how they were going to play. So there's obviously going to be a big shift to begin with anyway. And Núñez, as Raj said, he does like to peel off into those left-side channels. So it'll be interesting to see how Klopp manoeuvres that, because obviously Diaz likes to operate in quite a similar area too. And I don't know whether that's a change in formation or getting someone that plays in a 10 to push up and fill the holes that Núñez vacates centrally. I don't know. It's interesting to find out. As you said at the top of the show, they are the trendsetters at the moment in European football with Manchester City, and both have gone a completely different way this summer. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see how they fit in and if it works.
Mo Salah, new deal. Probably people thought it might run on a little bit longer. I mean, the saga does feel like it's been going on for a long time, but it's happened recently. How do you feel about that 3-year deal? Is it the right move?
Yeah, I think it's definitely the right move. I think with Mo Salah, you've obviously got a guy. He's a phenomenal goal scorer. He's shown that throughout his time. But also, I think we've seen an upwards trajectory in other parts of his game. For example, this season or last season, he was the top assist maker in the Premier League as well. He's gone up a level in terms of his creative ability. I think even after AFCON, where his performances definitely did dip and he looked fatigued, you saw his creative side of the game come to the fore. Villarreal in the Champions League semi-final, he assisted 2 goals in that tie. Even at the Etihad in the big title crunch match they had in April, I think it was, he assisted a brilliant goal for Mane. So I think this guy is adding new facets to his game. He's definitely still on that upwards trajectory. Whereas someone like Mane, that was the debate really. Do you renew Mane, Salah, or both? Someone like Mane, I think you've seen a dip in his all-round game since probably August 2020. After Liverpool won the title, he's not been as explosive. His 1v1 dribbling, which used to be the best part of his game, has diminished slightly, and he's become more of a penalty box player, Sadio Mane. Well, I think Mo Salah is on that upward trajectory in terms of his overall game. So I think Liverpool have made the right move there. And if you had to pick one, I would have renewed Salah personally. And I think Salah as well, there's something about his physical shape and his mentality. Well, I think he's in that kind of Benzema, Lewandowski, Cristiano Ronaldo kind of mold, where he'll keep on going into his late mid-30s probably at a top level. There's that hunger about him. He's always talking about individual records and also team trophies. I think he's got that in him to carry on.
I think he started at least 30 Premier League matches every season he's been at Liverpool. So as Raj said, he's not shown any signs of physically declining. He takes amazing care of himself to play that many games, and I think he hates being dropped. He hates being rested. He wants to play every game. He wants to score every goal. And for Liverpool in the Premier League, he's actually had a direct hand at 164 goals in 180 Premier League appearances. In that time, he's up there with De Bruyne and Harry Kane as the top-rated players in the division. And I think everyone expected there to be one departure this summer. There's obviously Firmino as well, was obviously into the final year of his contract. And I probably would have actually guessed Salah probably at the start of the year that he would have been the one to go. But it's Mane that's gone. And I think if you look over the basis of the last 18 months, as Raj touched on, Mane's form he's had a terrific 2022, but over the last 18 months, there has been a decline. And Salah, who hasn't been as impressive in 2022, has generally been one of the best players in the world. So I do think it was the right decision from Liverpool. I guess the only problem is what it means, because they've shattered their wage structure to keep him, what that might mean later on. But definitely for now, no-brainer for me.
Fabio Carvalho and Calvin Ramsey have come in, Raj. Probably not massive expectations on these guys, young boys coming into their first season, but there hasn't really been a backup right back at Liverpool, and Carvalho's had a good time at Fulham. He's a good player. Looks like he's got a lot of stuff in his locker. Happy with those two signings?
Yeah, I think they're two good signings. As you say, Dan, there's no pressure for them to come in and hit the ground running. They can just be nice squad additions to start with as Klopp kind of develops them. Klopp's renowned for really taking time to integrate players, and I think that'll work with these two. Carvalho, as you say, a very exciting player. He's quick. He's a good dribbler. I think he's also shown this ability to make third-man runs into the box and scored quite a few goals for Fulham by doing that. His finishing actually looks quite accomplished for a 19-year-old lad. And I think you mentioned earlier he could play a bit on the left wing of a front three, but as a backup to Luis Diaz. Or I'm quite interested to see whether he might play that more advanced attacking right-sided number 8 role in the midfield three for Klopp. Making those runs into the box, dribbling from those areas. And we saw Klopp use Harvey Elliott in that role at the start of last season before his injury against Leeds. So I'm wondering whether there might be a role there for Carvalho in that position. And as you say, Ramsey, Trent's not had much of a backup. He had Neco Williams for a time, but he didn't really produce the same kind of style of play as Trent. Ramsey, I haven't seen loads of the guy, but from what I hear and what clips I've watched, he does have that kind of stylistic similarity to Trent in terms of his delivery into the box is actually pretty good. And the Scottish youth teams are quite excited about his development. So maybe this is another find, like Kostas Tsimikas was for Liverpool on the left-hand side as backup to Robertson. Ramsey might be another one that their scouting department has come up with to challenge Trent and maybe push him to new heights, because that's what Tsimikas is. And I think Robertson felt that competition and he had to elevate his game as a result of that. So it could be a good buy. What
are we looking at then for an overall grade for Liverpool's transfer window then, Josh?
I'm going to give them a B, simply because I do feel like they're short in midfield, which I guess we'll probably come on to in the next section. When you look at Manchester City have just signed Calvin Phillips to replace Fernandinho, to go in with the players that they already had in those positions. I just don't think Liverpool can compete in that area at the moment. And it sounds as like they're not going to even try and compete for another midfielder this summer. If Curtis Jones and Harvey Elliott and Fabio Carvalho, if they come on leaps and bounds, then that's great. But I do feel that they're a bit short there, so I've only gone for a B.
Yeah, I have to agree. It's B as well. I think that is the biggest area of improvement in the Liverpool squad. I mean, you're nitpicking really when you're hitting 90+ points in the Premier League. Yeah, but that is the kind of margins with Manchester City you're facing with. I think Man City have improved the main weakness in their team with Erling Haaland as a goal scorer in those kind of games, which frustrated them, like Palace and Southampton. But Liverpool's main area of weakness, I think, was the midfield. They did lack a bit of control in midfield at times and a bit of attacking productivity as well. So, yeah, I can only give it a B.
Let's look then now at the concerns that we have. We've just touched on them a little bit. Will they regret not signing another midfielder? Is it going to cost them, Raj? Because I think if you look at the starting three, I mean, Henderson is obviously coming towards the end of his career now, but Fabinho, Henderson and Thiago, it's a brilliant midfield. Thiago's suddenly not there sometimes, or Fabinho even isn't there. I don't think there's the same quality to come in, whereas, as we've just said, with Man City, I think they probably do have the quality to bring in central areas if someone's missing.
Yeah, Dan, I think you're spot on there to point about Thiago's availability. I've got a stat here, actually. Liverpool dropped points in 10 Premier League games last season, 8 draws, 2 losses. In 8 of those 10 games, they came when one of Thiago or Naby Keita weren't playing on the left side of that midfield. And I think that is the crucial role in the Klopp system, 4-3-3. For Liverpool, because that left side of number 8 role is both tasked with controlling games in possession, but also defensively sitting alongside Fabinho and providing that extra protection. And so when one of those two weren't starting, and that's very often because these two guys are both injury prone, I think games became too chaotic. And I think you saw that in some of the big 6 games. Liverpool did, so not big 6, big 4 games against the rest of the top 4. Liverpool didn't win any of those games. And some of them were very chaotic. If you remember the game at Stamford Bridge, Liverpool were 2-0 up. Then the midfield didn't have Thiago or Keita starting, and they lost control of the match. Chelsea dominated it with Kovacic and Kante. Same happened at Anfield. Liverpool went up twice with Mo Salah brilliance, but they then squandered those leads. Again, the midfield weren't tracking runners defensively, and it was more of an end-to-end game. There was no control there. And again, it happened again at the Etihad. Man City's midfield ran all over them. Kevin De Bruyne was phenomenal that day, and Liverpool didn't really have a response. So yeah, I think that is a main concern for Liverpool.
Look, I looked into their matches against the rest of the top 4, and in 5 of the 6 games, they had to use a different midfield 3. Tyler Morton even started in 1. Thiago only started in 2, and I think that's the control where they were lacking, obviously Thiago not being there. And I broke down Liverpool's midfield last season by the percentage of minutes that they played in the Premier League. So Jordan Henderson featured in the most. He featured in 76% of their Premier League season. Then it was Fabinho at 68%, and then Thiago's third at just 45%. Naby Keita only 34%. And I think if you're looking at it's the reliability issue that they have there, and I think they've been linked to Jude Bellingham. Just by contrast, he played in 93% of Borussia Dortmund's Bundesliga campaign last season. So I think that's where the fine margins are. You're finishing 1 point behind Manchester City, and these are the things that matter. Not having Tyler Morton, who could grow into be a fantastic player, but having him starting in one of the top 4 games is probably just not ideal. And Thiago only starting in 2 again, obviously not ideal. I do feel that they're probably not going to address that situation this summer. They want to wait for Jude Bellingham next year, and I think that could again cost them quite dearly this season.
And Josh, that availability factor comes back to the man they let go, who was the most available midfielder for Liverpool, Gini Wijnaldum. He wasn't replaced last summer. I came on a similar pod last summer expressing that concern, not replacing Wijnaldum being a key factor. He did offer that control. He's a guy who can keep the ball in a phone box, really, and defensively he's fantastic. And he's still not been replaced. And I do find that a bit strange, to be honest, when he's the guy who played most of the games for Liverpool in midfield, and you decide to let him go but not replace him. So yeah, if they do that again this summer, then it could rear its head again.
There's a lot to be said for waiting for the right player. I actually kind of respect that transfer ethos, not buying someone for the sake of it. But you could say there's an argument. Wijnaldum's obviously not getting much football at PSG. Did he try and loan him for a year while you wait that year for Bellingham? Because Bellingham's probably going to come in next summer. I think probably an argument there that Liverpool should try that, but it doesn't really feel like their style.
I think it comes down to as well who Klopp seems to trust in midfield. He went off Curtis Jones and Harvey Elliott towards the back end of Harvey Elliott was injured for most of it, but didn't seem to really fancy Curtis Jones. Oxlade-Chamberlain barely featured. Milner actually featured in more of the season than Oxlade-Chamberlain, and obviously they've just given another 1-year deal to Milner, who I thought, for as fit as he is for his age, I did think he looked like he was running through custard at the end of last season. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know if you're keeping Milner around. Could you not have maybe got rid of him and got someone else in? I don't know. Like, time will tell, but it does feel like they're a little bit light there.
Let's look now at what we think the best 11 is going to be for Liverpool this season. Raj, have you got a team there?
Yeah, so obviously Alisson, there's no debating that one, and then Trent at right back. The right-sided centre-back role is probably the one with debate. Konate, Matip, and even Joe Gomez. Konate and Matip shared the minutes last season, but I think Konate will start most of the Premier League matches this season. I think you saw him develop as the season went on. He was fantastic. I thought in that title running and in the Champions League running, even in the Champions League final, I thought he was one of Liverpool's best performers to keep Vinicius fairly quiet outside of the goal. So yeah, and then Van Dijk partnering him, Robertson. Yeah, I'll still start him at left back. As good as Kostas Tsimikas has been, I think Robertson defensively still has the edge on Tsimikas. And if we're going to stick with the same 4-3-3 that Klopp's used, probably Fabinho is definitely Fabinho is going to start as the starting number 6. And then Thiago as a left-sided number 8. And then the right-sided number 8. I think that's another position to debate. Jordan Henderson, does he start? Obviously, he provides that leadership that Klopp loves, energy. But it was a bit disappointing when you're playing that most attacking right-sided 8 role, and he only came up with, I think, 2 goals and 6 assists in the Premier League last season. That I think you need a bit more productivity for that role. So I think Henderson will start most of the games, but I can see Harvey Elliott, Fabio Carvalho, especially starting their fair share as well. And then the front three will be, I think, Luis Diaz on the left. I think he looked a very good signing coming in January, and he settled immediately to the pace of the Premier League. He's providing that kind of 1v1 dribbling that Mane used to provide. So yeah, he'll start on the left. And I think obviously Darwin up top and Mo Salah off the right hand side.
Yeah, we actually had the same points of debate that Raj brought up. It was the right-sided centre-back role and the right-sided central midfielder. Obviously, the rest of the team is the set. We've used league ratings, I should say, from last season. So we had Alisson in goal, Alexander-Arnold right back, Van Dijk left centre-back, Robertson left back, and we've got Joel Matip as the centre-back that completes that. He was actually one of the top-rated centre-backs in the Premier League last season for good reason. He was terrific, but as Raj said, there was a bit of a changing of the guard towards the end of last season where Konate got the nod in the big games, but obviously he didn't play enough for that rating to really challenge Matip. And then in midfield, we've got Fabinho and Thiago, and then we've actually, this is obviously never going to happen, but we've got Fabio Carvalho as the right-sided midfielder in that front three. He obviously had a terrific campaign in the Championship, but there's no way that Klopp's going to pick a 19-year-old over Jordan Henderson, at least right away. But that's interesting that he does get that role, and we've spoken about him. And as Raj said earlier in the pod, it's those third-man runs that he makes into the box that could be quite important down the line, particularly if you see Luis Diaz and Darwin Núñez operating and sort of more on that left side of the penalty box. There will be space for someone to push on. I mean, that's probably more suited to his game than Jordan Henderson's. And in the front three was exactly the same. We had Salah, Núñez, and Diaz.
Have they got the depth? Because that best 11, it kind of picks itself. That's not an insult because it's a great 11, but I feel like when you're picking Man City's 11, you'd have more combinations. So yeah, it's a difficult one there because if you'd have picked Liverpool's best front three last season with the options they had, I think it would have been a lot harder. But now I kind of think again, it kind of picks itself.
It's difficult as well, isn't it? Because Liverpool seems to be play, which is great, seems to be placing a lot of faith in some of their younger players, but it's just how they develop this season. Is Harvey Elliott, Fabio Carvalho, Curtis Jones, are they all going to kick on at the same time? Will only one of them kick on? They're obviously placing a lot of faith in that. And they got rid of, they let Divock Origi go, who obviously is a bit of an icon for Liverpool fans. Minamino had his moments in the Cups as well. He's gone. So they are relying on youth a lot, which is fantastic. But obviously it comes with its gamble.
The next section we're going to do is the player to watch, where we each pick one player to watch for the 22-23 season for Liverpool. Raj, I'll come to you first because I need to give myself a little bit of thinking time. Who are you going for?
So yeah, I mentioned him already. I think Ibrahim Konate is my one to watch this season. I think he will start more games this season in Premier League, and I think this is a bold shout, but I think he's going to be regarded as one of the best centre backs in Europe by the end of this season. I think he's got pretty much everything. Aerial, yeah, really, yeah, fair enough. So I think he's got aerial dominance, he's got pace, he's strong as an ox. But also, I don't think he's overly reliant on that. I think someone like Deo Upamecano, who used to be his teammate at Leipzig, you've seen him rely too much on those physical traits. I think Konate is the opposite. He's more a specialist in reading the game. I think he's often positioned in the right place at the right time. And I mentioned before in the Champions League final, I think his performance against Vinicius was particularly impressive. I think obviously Trent sometimes caught upfield. Konate narrowed that gap between the right back and the centre back. And he really stopped Vinicius from causing much trouble on the ball. Obviously, he did score in the end, but that was more down to Trent and Van Dijk and Robertson. But he had a few runs in that inside left channel, but Konate came across immediately and shut him down. So, yeah, he is my one to watch, I think, this season.
I'm in the same position, but a different player. And this is entirely from an England perspective. But I would love to see Joe Gomez come back into the fold and re-establish himself alongside Van Dijk. I still think that Gomez Van Dijk partnership's probably been the best under Klopp, but Gomez has just had a terrible time with injuries. But I just feel that because no one's come in for him that we know of with any firm interest in a World Cup year, then I'm hoping that he's been told that there's a clean slate for him this summer and that he can try and re-establish himself. I think it's going to be tough. Konate obviously had a great debut season, but in that 19-20 season when Liverpool were miles clear, I think 18 points clear of Manchester City that season, they started 22 league games together. They won 19, and the aggregate scoreline across those games was 52-17 in Liverpool's favour. So for England's sake, I hope it's Joe Gomez. Well, he's my player to watch, but I'm not entirely confident that that's going to come true.
You picked a player to watch. Who probably won't play.
I think you're right there, though, Josh. The reason he's staying is interesting. He might have been promised a bit more game time. As you said previously, Matip and Konate kind of were sharing their minutes quite a lot in that right side centre-back role. So hopefully Gomez, if he doesn't get ahead of Konate, hopefully he can get ahead of Matip at least and get those minutes. Because I think, personally, Joe Gomez, John Stones is the best England centre-back partnership. We've seen them a few times against Brazil, Germany, Croatia in a Nations League match. I think it was in 2018 when we got to the final. I think those two are the most proactive, best ball-playing centre-backs. So, yeah, as I say, for England's hopes in the World Cup, those two would be, I'll put my faith in those two. Hopefully Gomez can get the game time.
And Gomez, obviously, he got his game time at the end of last season at right-back, but obviously Liverpool have now signed another right-back. So you imagine that his only game time would be at centre-back. So let's hope.
I feel like choosing Matip just because you two both chose a right-sided centre-back, and then if I choose Matip, we can see who plays the most games at the end of the season. I'll go for Luis Diaz, just because he hit the ground running straight away. It was so good. So you can imagine with a full pre-season, a full Klopp pre-season behind him as well, he's going to be even more ferocious in the season to come. So I'll go for Luis Diaz. I'll go against the grain and not pick a centre-back. Expectations then for the 22-23 season. Raj, what are you expecting? What are you hoping for?
So I think when you've got a team as good as Man City you're competing against, you can't really say you expect the league title. As we said, the margins are just wafer thin between the two teams. In 3 seasons now in the Premier League, there's been a couple of points separating them, or 2 seasons there's been a point separating them. I think Liverpool, all you can say is they need to take the title challenge to the end. I do think they'll fall short, personally, just in second place. As I said, I think City have addressed their main weakness, having that focal point goal scorer. Liverpool haven't with the midfield. So, yeah, I can only say second place and again, another deep Champions League run. But I do think City have the edge with what they've done in the transfer market. Even, as you mentioned before, the Calvin Phillips signing to replace Fernandinho, that's another upgrade for them. Yeah. So, yeah. I think City are still in pole position.
Yeah, I'm gonna agree with you. I'm gonna go for second as well. It's you know, they didn't win it last season, and Man City look like they're going to be even more fearsome this season. They're going to be tough to beat. Liverpool are going to have an impeccable record, I think, to keep up with Man City again, and it's tough. But you know, they do it, don't they? They do it more often than not. So it'll probably go all the way again. But I think Manchester City are just a little bit stronger than Liverpool. Josh?
I've got second place as well. And I think it's actually over the last 4 seasons, I think the two teams are only separated by a point. So the cumulative points totals over the last 4 seasons, I think they're only separated by a point. So they keep pushing and pushing each other all the way. But yeah, second place for Liverpool, I feel.
We'll finish then with a Q&A section. And question 1 has come from Palash Singh. Will there be any major changes to our tactics, Raj, given the lack of creativity in midfield? So the 4-2-3-1, it has been used on a few occasions by Klopp. With the personnel that they've got there now, there could be a case for playing it again.
Yeah, I mean, we even saw it in the Champions League final when Liverpool fell behind. Firmino came on, created a front 4. Firmino as a number 10, Mane up front, Jota on the left, Salah on the right. So it's possible that could happen again. I would be interested in maybe looking at a 4-4-2 as well. I think Salah alongside Nunez in a front 2 might work well, with Diaz wide left in a 4-4-2, and maybe Elliott or even someone like Carvalho or Oxlade-Chamberlain on the right-hand side of the 4-4-2. And I think Salah actually had a very similar partnership to the one you can imagine with Nunez when he played with Edin Dzeko at Roma. he used him as a kind of a combination man, playing quick 1-2s off him, and just using him as a big man to hold the ball up as well. We've seen glimpses of that with Salah and Origi as well. They combined for a few goals last season like that. So I think that could be an interesting option for Liverpool. And also, if you look at Luis Diaz, before he came to Liverpool at Porto, he did excel on the left side of a 4-4-2 as well. So that's Liverpool's last 2 attacking buys, maybe being suited to that system. So yeah, maybe that could be an interesting one to watch.
I wasn't expecting that point, but to be fair, you backed it up pretty well, Raj. Josh, you any thoughts?
Who would you feel would be the right midfielder in a 4-4-2? Who do you think best suits that?
I think Harvey Elliott probably was the one I was looking at. I think obviously he's a left-footed player. I think he can cut inside and create from that area. And then you've got Trent Alexander-Arnold on the overlap. So yeah, maybe that could be a dynamic to look at.
Interesting. Question 2, we've kind of already covered, but we'll just go over it a little bit again. It's from Samuel Parkinson. Will Konate now take over as Van Dijk's main partner? I have a thought, not that this Q&A was for me at all. I think pre-World Cup, before the break, I think in the group stage, I think Matip will play the Champions League games and Konate will play the league games. I think there'll be a little bit of a switch to what there was last season. Would you be happy to see that, Raj?
Yeah, I think that's fair enough, because obviously the Champions League games pre the World Cup aren't as important as the knockout ones. So maybe that's
succession as well this time.
Oh yeah, that's very true. They're cramming in a lot, aren't they, before the World Cup? So yeah, I think that you might be right with that one actually.
Thank you very much, Raj. Nice to be right every now and again, but we will see. Question 3 is from M. Garley. What type of midfielder perfectly fits in a Klopp system? I presume this means to play as a number 8, I would assume, because Fabinho's got the holding midfielder role covered.
Yeah, so that's an interesting one. I'll give a name first before I'll give some traits. I think Jude Bellingham. I think this guy is just absolutely tailor-made for the Klopp system. I think what Klopp wants, especially from that right-sided midfielder, he wants energy. That's first and foremost. He needs a guy who helps press from the front, helps that front free press, but also can trap back and cover Trent, for example, in those right back slots. So you need a guy who can get up and down the pitch. Jude Bellingham's definitely that. But also, I think to take Liverpool to the next level, he needs someone who can contribute in the final third, can get goals, has a technical ability in tight spaces to get assists. I think Bellingham can do that as well. So I think he is the Klopp midfielder. And Liverpool should definitely be looking at him, whether it's this season or next summer.
Well, question 4 is about a current Liverpool midfielder. It's come from Elliot. Some fans are still not convinced of Naby Keita. Has he improved? If so, which areas has he improved in, Raj?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. Naby Keita, he splits a lot of the Liverpool fan base in half, to be honest. I think his last season actually was his most impressive one. He stayed away from injuries more than usual. That's not saying much because he was injury prone before, but still, I think he had an impact in that. And I think his best role was on that left-hand side of the midfield as a kind of deputy to Thiago. He's probably not good enough to start. I don't think he suits that attacking right-sided 8 role at the best, for example. I don't think he's got the physicality to get up and down the pitch, as I explained before. But in that left-sided 8 role, I think he can control games with his ability in possession. He's a decent passer of the ball. He can carry the ball forward, similar to Thiago. And defensively, he is fairly clever in the way he can position himself next to Fabinho. So yeah, I'd say he had his best season, and that's why I'd be using him. Naby Keita and Thiago in rotation on that left-hand side. And because they're both injury-prone, that might actually get the best out of them fitness-wise as well, if they can share that playing load.
Yeah, it feels like he popped up with a few more important goals last season than he had done in previous campaigns. Josh of WhoScored, got any data on this? I'm putting you on the spot a little bit, but was he improved overall last season compared to his other seasons?
Well, he only featured in 35% of the season, which isn't great. I just think the problem for Naby Keita is he just can't play, just can't get that run of games under his belt. And I think we saw when he did play a certain number of games, that's when we got the best of him. Which obviously sounds silly to say. The more you play, you have match rhythm, and you'll be better. But yeah, he did actually score more goals last season than he has in any other season for Liverpool. But that's just because he played the most games since his debut campaign. But yeah, sharing the workload is probably the best way to go and try and keep him fitter for longer. But it just probably means you won't get to see the best of him.
Yeah, it doesn't always work like that. Martin appeared in more podcasts than most people last season, but he still, he didn't really get himself going at any point, even though he was on most weeks. So it doesn't always work. It doesn't work in every facet of life, that's for sure. That does us for this week's Edge of the Box. So, of course, we've previewed Liverpool today. We're going to be doing Tottenham on Monday the 11th and Manchester City on Friday the 15th, and then we'll move on to the other big 6 teams after that. So keep your eye out for when those videos are coming out. If you subscribe to the channel, you'll find out exactly when they do come out, because you'll get a little notification on your phone or whatever device you are using to access YouTube. Nothing else to say really, other than stay safe.